So there I was scrolling through Pinterest, hunting for some inspiration for my next project. I'm swiping past all these flashy designs, and then I stumble upon this one lonely image, a cucumber product shot. The jar was sitting there all plain, with a few cucumber slices just laying by its side. Nothing fancy, no drama, but something about it caught my eye. It felt like it had potential. Then it hit me. What if I took this simple, quiet image and turned it into something alive, something dynamic? What if those cucumber slices were actually falling, spinning, and landing around the product, bringing the whole scene to life? That's when I knew I had to animate it. Today, I'll show you the workflow of how I did it in 3ds Max. And yes, all on my trashy 8 GB RAM laptop that barely keeps up. Let's dive in and make some 3D magic happen. First things first, we're going to start by creating the product container itself. And we're keeping it super simple. A cylinder. Nothing crazy here because, let's be real, if I push my laptop too far, it might just freeze on me and never come back. We'll make a cylinder with the right radius and height that gives us that classic jar-like shape. Don't forget to chamfer the edges to smooth them out a bit. You don't want any sharp, unrealistic edges in your final render. Smooth it out and boom. You've got yourself the foundation for a basic jar. Easy, right? But we're just getting started. Next, we need the lid. You might think, oh, another cylinder. Yep, but this time it's smaller and shorter. We want it to fit snugly on top of our jar, like a glove. To make sure it looks neat, give it a quick bevel. Beveling those edges adds that realistic touch and ensures it's not just a boring cylinder. You'll see the difference later when the light hits it. Now let's talk about the label, because what's a jar without one? I went ahead and selected the edges of the container, detached them, and then extruded the label area. I started by extruding it by 0.1, too much clearly. Then 0.01, not enough definitely. After some trial and error, I settled on 0.015, which looked just right. That's a little trick you pick up. Sometimes you've got to eyeball it and trust your instincts. Once I got the size dialed in, I UV unwrapped the label. And if you've ever struggled with UV mapping, trust me, you're not alone. It can feel like a nightmare, but once you get the hang of it, it becomes second nature. Pro tip: if you really want to master UV mapping without pulling your hair out, hit up my Discord channel, link in the description. We've got a community where we dive into these details. You'll thank me later, I promise. With the container and label done, let's move on to the backdrop. We're keeping it simple. A flat plane that serves as the background. It's minimal and clean. Sometimes, less is more. Don't overcomplicate things when it's not necessary. A clean backdrop ensures the focus stays on the product. Oh, and I threw in a camera and a light. Basic stuff. Lighting is key here, but you don't want to go too crazy with it, especially if your setup is as humble as mine. We're keeping it straightforward to avoid unnecessary lag and crashes. Now for the fun part, creating the cucumber and orange slices. You'd think it'd be simple, but at first these slices just looked flat and sad. So I started with thin cylinders to represent the slices, but flat. 3D cylinders don't exactly scream fresh produce, do they? To fix this, I hopped online and found some high-res images of cucumber and orange slices. I opened up Photoshop to turn these images into textures, and I could practically hear my laptop groaning. Not Photoshop 2, but I powered it through. Once the textures were ready, it was back to 3ds Max to apply them to our cylinder slices. This part took some time because I had to fiddle with the UV unwraps until everything lined up just right. A poorly wrapped texture can ruin the whole scene, so take your time here. After some tweaking, the slices finally looked crisp and delicious, just like the real deal. Before moving on, I double-checked the product label's UV unwrap. This might seem like a small detail, but it's crucial. If your UVs are off, your label might look like it's floating in some weird alternate dimension. No one wants that. So I made sure it was perfectly aligned. This step may feel repetitive, but trust me, it's better to fix it now than regret it later. And now, the real magic begins. Animation. Using 3ds Max's built-in Mass Effects tool, I added gravity to the fruit slices. The idea was to make them fall naturally and interact with the product container, like they're floating in slow motion. It's one of those satisfying moments when everything comes together, but not without some struggle. My laptop was working hard, breathing heavy, like it was running a marathon. I half expected it to crash, but with some patience and a few prayers, the slices fell beautifully, landing around the jar like they had a mind of their own. It's always a great feeling when the physics work in your favor. Here's where things could have gone seriously wrong: rendering everything at once. If I had tried that, my laptop would have gone into full meltdown mode. So instead, I rendered the cucumber and orange slices separately. This kept everything under control and avoided the dreaded blue screen of death. Splitting your renders into smaller parts is a great way to work around a limited system. It takes a bit longer, but trust me, it's worth it to avoid a crash. With the renders complete, I pulled the clips into Premiere Pro for editing. At this point, Premiere Pro was the only program open because, let's face it, my laptop has the multitasking ability of a brick. I synced the animation with some royalty-free music. Pro tip: when you're editing, try to cut your clips to match the beat of the music. It gives your animation that polished, professional vibe. If you're really craving a step-by-step, frame-by-frame breakdown of how I made this, then you need to check out my Discord or Patreon. That's where I go deep into the nitty-gritty without fear of my laptop giving up on life. Plus, with your support, maybe I can finally get a machine that doesn't freeze when I open Photoshop and 3ds Max at the same time. It's a win-win situation. You get more in-depth tutorials, and I get closer to a computer that can handle the pressure. So hit the links below, like, subscribe, and don't forget to join the community. Together, we'll keep my laptop alive and kicking. See you in the next one.